Welcome to the Cool Health Podcast, where we unlock groundbreaking research in health and wellness by bringing you the latest in health news and in-depth interviews with experts in their fields. We're here to make health cool again. All right, guys, after 47 billion minutes of trying to figure out the audio, we are back again with the Cool Health Podcast. Richard L. Blake in the building. I'm going to write the best intro about him, but man, this guy has been on Men's Health magazine. He's training for a PhD in breathwork. We're going to learn everything when it comes to psychedelics, breathwork, practice, we're going to learn about the mind, the default mode network. It's going to be quite the episode. Richard, I became attracted to your work and what you do because you have a lot of similar things that I personally enjoy myself. You got the biohacking aspect to you. You like Ali Tura. Shout out Andy. You're a breathwork practitioner. And one thing that stuck out to me was that you're called the Breath Geek. How'd you get this proclaimed title?
Yeah, well, thanks for that intro, Jack. How I got the name The Breath Geek was I was on a breathwork training to be a breath worker. It was sort of the second training I'd done, and it was, I'm not going to name the training, but it was very sort of like very spiritual, very esoteric, very like loving and love and light and things. And people would ask questions of the facilitators who were sort of, old school, like phase one, new age, peace and love type people, wonderful people. And people would ask things like, what's happening with tetany? So tetany is something that happens during breath work. People's hands and mouth cramp up because of changes in respiratory alkalosis. Right. The blood oxygen concentration starts changing. And people would ask, like, a facilitator, what's happening? How do we explain to people what's happening with the cramping in the hands? And they said, well, we're not really sure, but we like to think it's about people struggling to let go of things, because it looks like people are holding on with their hands and they're not letting go of, control or grief and things. And I would put my hand up and be like, oh yeah. And I think it's actually also changes in blood oxygen, and respiratory alkalosis is what it actually is. And I kept on answering questions for them. And then by the end of the week, they were just like, all right, whatever, Breath Geek, you just answer all the questions for us. And they said it, in a nice way. And I wasn't trying to like undermine them. I was just trying to offer, there are different interpretations of what's happening in breath work. So, yeah, it's basically because I'm really interested in the science of a lot of the spiritual and the woo-woo stuff. And I annoys the spiritual people by explaining things in scientific ways. And I guess I just took on that kind of jokey insult and just be like, yeah, I am a breath geek, actually. And I'm fine with that.
Geeks are welcome here. And let's get into it. What defines breath work? What really is it? Not that many people know, so.
Yeah, well, it's a big sort of all-encompassing thing. It's a bit like saying what's exercise. It's like, well, there's a lot of different kinds. And, the first response I can remember one of my best friends telling his mum, oh, you remember Richard from school? Yeah, he's now a breathwork teacher. And they're just like, I know how to breathe. I've been breathing for 60 years. What's he going to tell me about breathing? So there's a lot of that kind of skepticism around it, with older generations. But, I kind of see, 4 categories of breath work. So there's functional breathing, which is how to breathe correctly, how to, not have sleep apnea, how to address asthma. And the leading pioneers there would be people like the Buteyko Clinic and Oxygen Advantage. And Patrick McEwen is sort of the most famous person there. He's awesome. And then there is sort of the yoga and the pranayama school. So there's a lot of people who think, oh yeah, I know breathwork. I've done it in yoga, like the lion's breath and things like that. And that's breath work as well. And then there, I would say, is more of like the intermittent hypoxic training. So that's like Wim Hof and the breath holds and Soma and things like that. And that comes from Tumo, and that's from, I think it's from Tibetan Buddhism. And then there's conscious connected breathing, which is the one I'm doing my PhD research on. And that one actually is a Western tradition. It actually was invented by Dr. Stanislav Grof, a Czech American psychiatrist who's working in Esalen back in the 60s and 70s. And he was a professor at universities, and he was doing research on LSD as a treatment for mental health conditions. And what he would notice after several hours of tripping on LSD, people would start to breathe in this peculiar way. And then he kind of reverse engineered that LSD breathing to be like, well, what happens if we don't give people LSD and we just make them breathe in that way? Of course, he had to do that because the LSD research became illegal. And he found that, yeah, he could elicit similar states, similar non-ordinary states of consciousness just from breathing. And that was called holotropic breath work. And then other schools like rebirthing and Leonard Orr and clarity breath work and things like that have evolved into what I just call, an umbrella term of conscious connected breathing. And now there's loads of schools. There's shamanic breathing, there's breath guru, there's transformational breath work, and all of these conscious connected breathing techniques, they are focused on healing mental health issues, healing depression, anxiety, addiction, trauma, and things like that. Whereas, there is other types of breath work that's about making someone better at CrossFit, or making someone sleep better, or enhancing yoga poses, etc.
Wow. That's a myriad of different functionalities that we can do with just our breath. We went all the way from just being able to breathe properly, which is not a common thing nowadays. Not a common thing. All the way to we can heal ourselves and maybe even trip balls. So very cool. So let's break down each segment. And I first want to get into that Patrick McEwen work, the oxygen advantage work, the CO2 tolerance stuff. I first want to start by saying people take a really big breath and they let it all out, and they think they're filling themselves up with oxygen, and they think they're doing themselves good when they're, breathing through their mouth and all these things. Let me ask you, why is overbreathing bad? And let's start there. What is that?
Yeah, why is overbreathing bad? So we are almost always overbreathing. All of us are. One of the reasons for that is just our toxic environments, toxins from air pollution, our food, our water, our EMFs, whatever you want to call a toxin. And it means that we have to detox faster. It means that our breath is our largest detox pathway. Actually, so if a few years ago we didn't know where fat went when people went on a diet and they lost fat, we were like, where's this fat going to? Like, are we peeing it out? Is it going out as number twos? Are we sweating it out? And eventually they discovered it comes out as breath. So if you've seen or been near someone on the keto diet, giving them a kiss, you'll know their breath is absolutely terrible. And a big reason for that is because they're burning fat.
Heard that.
So
Wow.
So we're having to detox because we live in a toxic environment. So that's one reason we're overbreathing. The other reason is because we're not breathing in and out through our nose. And breathing in and out through our nose is sort of, breathing 101. We want to be breathing in and out through our nose almost all the time. The reason being, nose is a breathing device, mouth is a talking device, a spitting device, a chewing device, a vomiting device, a speaking device. The nose humidifies, it filters, it increases nitric oxide, which helps us take in oxygen when we breathe in and out through our nose. Breathing through the nose activates the parasympathetic nervous system. Breathing through the mouth activates the sympathetic nervous system. So that means parasympathetic is the rest and digest. Sympathetic is the fight or flight. So we want to be more relaxed. If we want to be more relaxed, we want to breathe in and out through our nose. And carbon dioxide, so Patrick McEwen's book is called The Oxygen Advantage, and he said, I wish I called it the carbon dioxide advantage, but probably wouldn't have sold so much. The reason being is we need carbon dioxide. So yes, oxygen is what fuels our cells, but there's this thing called the Bohr effect, which means that when we breathe in, we take in obviously oxygen and carbon dioxide, and that oxygen then goes into the blood and goes into the hemoglobin of the blood. But the hemoglobin won't release the oxygen to the cells if there is not carbon dioxide present. So when we are breathing at rest at any moment during the day, we're at about 95, 98% blood oxygen saturation. You can get yourself up to 100% pretty easily if you do some voluntary hyperventilation. But what happens when you go up to 100% blood oxygen saturation is the blood clings on to that oxygen in the cells and then stops the transfer of the oxygen into the cells. And this is one of the mechanisms of conscious connected breathing. We can go on to this later about why conscious connected breathing elicits healing. It's to do with something called transient hypofrontality, but maybe I'll come back to that in a minute. So we need carbon dioxide to release the oxygen into the cells. That's the main thing. And if we're too sensitive to carbon dioxide, it means we're going to overbreathe, and this kind of snowball effect happens. The more sensitive we become to carbon dioxide, the more we overbreathe, and then the more we overbreathe, the more we become sensitive to carbon dioxide. So the oxygen advantage, the majority of the training there is about increasing your tolerance to carbon dioxide. And the way you do that is by under breathing and creating air hunger and starting to practice tolerating air hunger. And the simplest one, I love this one that I do all the time. Whenever I go into my ice barrel, I do this thing called cadence breathing. And it's basically a cadence of 1, 1, 2, 1. So what that would mean would be breathing in and out through the nose. So inhaling for, let's say you start with inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 8, hold for 4, and then I try and build that up. So inhale for 5, hold for 5, exhale for 10, hold for 5, and then I try and get up to like 12, 12, 24, 12, and just breathing really, really slow, trying to get down to like 1 breath per minute.
Wow.
And if you look in, sorry, one last thing before I stop. If you look into the animal kingdom and you look at the animals that breathe the least, like the naked mole rat. Don't ever go and look at a naked mole rat. They're not pretty looking. They look like a ball bag, basically. They don't have any fur. And basically they breathe like one breath per minute, and they have a phenomenally long life. It's almost impossible for them to get cancer. Researchers have injected them with like cancer creating molecules, and they fight it off because they're so tolerant of carbon dioxide. They breathe so slowly and so deeply that they are just incredibly healthy.
You really are a breath geek. Yes.
Thank you.
And to basically recap all that, we're saying we're living in this very toxic world, all of these triggers coming at us, whether it's the food, whether it's air. The air is crazy, man. I had Ian Clark on. He was telling me about the tires burn on the road and they go into air particles. Now they turn into microparticles, and the parts per million is so small, we're just straight inhaling it, right? CO2, we didn't even really define it, but that's the gas that's in our atmosphere, correct? But it's also created when we are digesting our foods and, making ATP and all that stuff, that whole process. Or am I missing a step there?
Yeah, and it's a byproduct of the ATP creation process. Yeah, we take in oxygen and we give out carbon dioxide as well in respiration.
And most literature and dogma suggests that CO2 is simply a trash gas or a wasteful gas, and we should just try to get it all out. But now we're hearing guys like you, guys like Patrick McEwen saying, hey, it's actually crucial for oxygenation of the tissues, the muscles, the ability for the hemoglobin to release into our body, correct? Or take the oxygen and...
so the hemoglobin releases the oxygen to the cells. Yeah, so the hemoglobin is like a boat that transports the oxygen to the cells.
And would the CO2 be considered the river itself?
The CO2, I guess, would be another passenger on the other side, coming back the other way.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
that goes into the spiritual stuff, right? So it's phenomenal, and we're just breathing too much right now. And I like what you said about that breathwork practice. We're going to get into a few. Now, we talked about why it's important, and how can people start to, I guess, develop more of a CO2 tolerance? so we're better able to use this gas?
Yeah, well, the first one is breathe through your nose as much as possible. Ways to do that, and it would be if you are an athlete, or exercising, at least whilst you're warming up, breathe in and out through your nose. And when you can't maintain in through the nose, out through the nose, go to in through the nose, out through the mouth. And then if you finally, you're gassy so much, go to in and out through the mouth. And another way, mouth taping. Have you heard of mouth taping?
I do it every
Jack?
night. It's amazing.
Great. Well, that's a great way. That is like an absolute key way to make sure that you are not over breathing at night and you're not snoring and you haven't got apnea issues. So mouth taping is basically exactly what it sounds like. For people who don't know, you get a little bit of tape. I use 3M micropore tape, but you can buy hostage tape. That's not actually designed for hostages. It's designed for tape. Mouth breathing. And you just need like a postage stamp size bit of tape. You can leave the sort of corners of your mouth untaped so that you can really breathe or yawn or talk through the sides of your mouth. And it's just like a cue, an unconscious cue to keep your mouth closed. And if you are someone who snores, if you're someone who wakes up with drool on your pillow, if you wake up with really bad breath and you're not on the keto diet, that is a sign that you are breathing in and out through your mouth. So that's a really good way to start. And then, as I mentioned earlier, another way to increase CO2 tolerance is cadence breathing and practicing under breathing, practicing tolerating air hunger. So that cadence breath of 1-1-2-1 is another really easy tool you can do, before a meal, in an ice bath, in a sauna, whilst you're waiting at a traffic light.
What do you suggest the rhythm be when people are just normally breathing throughout the day? Yeah,
so the research shows 5.5 breaths per minute is the optimal amount. So 5.5 breaths per minute, which is about an inhale for 5.5 seconds and an exhale for 5.5 seconds. That's obviously very precise, and there is no need to be exactly 5.5, 4 or 6 seconds each side is generally fine. And it's interesting that an Om and an Ave Maria are also at about that same 5.5 breaths per minute.
Interesting. So Om, like while you're meditating, you're saying? It's funny how that works. Kind of activation of the vagus nerve. And this is great because we have to relearn how to breathe as, our society. We're overstressed, overtoxined. So this 5.5 breathing, that's really going to help us. I love the mouth tape because the way that mouth tape has impacted my deep sleep, my ability to not be stressed throughout the day, waking up refreshed, it's pinnacle. And you're absolutely right. Breathing through the nose has truly changed me, and the benefits are amazing. And I know we're talking about the functional and the science behind this, but let's get into a bit of some of the other work that you do for breathwork. You mentioned healing, and I've looked into Wim Hof, and I've looked into some of these amazing other practitioners, and they talk about releasing trauma, ancestral trauma, the ability to, almost like Joe Dispenza work, get into this new identity and really connect with oneself. Talk us through a little of that, Richard. What are you doing in that field? And we'll start there.
Yeah, so I'm a PhD candidate in the East-West Psychology Department at CIIS in San Francisco, and that's where I'm running a clinical trial testing conscious connected breathing on anxiety. So I've got it's currently running at the moment, so I can't say too much about it, but it's basically before and after pre-test, post-test measures of anxiety using the Zung self-rating anxiety scale. And then people are doing a 6-week program of conscious connected breathing with me. So that's one 90-minute workshop per week of group conscious connected breathing held by me and my wife, Natalia, the breath chica. Hey. And and we're testing that against a control group. So it's a randomized control trial, the first randomized control trial, I believe, of conscious connected breathing, the first online conscious connected breathing study. And I think it's going to be the largest in terms of actual participants.
Congrats, man. That's awesome.
So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. We're halfway through. I'm not sure when this is going to get put out, but the next cohort. ASAP. So before 6th of
Oh yeah,
November?
for sure. We're getting this out
Okay,
ASAP
great.
after hearing that.
Okay, excellent. Well, that's great because yeah, we're still looking for participants for cohort 2, which the first workshop will be on the 7th of November. So get your application in. You can find the application on my website, thebreathgeek.com, and yeah, just breathwork research, read about it, and then apply. And if you meet all the inclusion criteria, we'll get you involved. And it's free. And if you complete the trial, you get a $20 Amazon gift voucher. So it's your chance to get free breath work effectively if you've never tried it before. And it is for new people. Unfortunately, if you've done more than 5 sessions of conscious connected breathing, we can't include you in that study. But for everyone else, please.
Then let's define conscious connected breathing to make sure we can get into this thing. What exactly is conscious connected breathing again?
Yeah, so that is the lineage that comes from Stanislav Grof. So that is anything like transformational breathing, shamanic breathing, clarity breathwork, rebirthing, who else? Breath Guru, those kinds of schools where it's basically there's a few, so there's an umbrella term and the things that the threads that run through all of that is firstly it's a mouth breath, which is shocking given what I've just said about breathing in and out through the nose. So yeah, I know. Well, let me explain. So the reason it's a mouth breath is one, we're activating the sympathetic nervous system. So this type of breath work is not about down regulating the nervous system. It's not about relaxing. It's actually bringing in all sorts of energy. And people really do feel energy when they do this type of breath work. They feel like they have champagne bubbles running through their body. And some people call it prana or chi, but it's really activating and energizing. And the reason for that is because, so I don't know if I want to get into this too much, but the theory of Peter Levine and his work about trauma is a truncated survival process. So what that means is mammals, when we experience a fight, flight, freeze situation, we liberate survival energy. That means, we get a load of energy so that we can run away from a lion. That's the standard analogy. And then after we've run away from that lion and we're in a safe space, we shake. And if you've ever seen a deer, they shake. If you've seen a dog after a fight, they shake. They're shaking out that energy. They're shaking out that truncated survival response. But we as humans and social creatures, especially with children, we see someone shaking, we see a child crying, we go, oh no, don't cry, stop crying, everything's fine, big boys don't cry, don't shake, don't be afraid. But actually that's just a mammalian response to a really difficult situation. And if we stop that process, that stuff gets stuck in the nervous system. So BBTRS, this is another form of conscious connected breath work, stands for biodynamic breath and trauma release system. Their whole analogy is so the nervous system is sort of like, it's like a river sort of going up and down between parasympathetic and sympathetic. And we want to activate the sympathetic nervous system to go back into that survival process and complete the process so that we can go back down into being relaxed in that parasympathetic state. And that's the reason for breathing in and out through the mouth. The other reason for breathing in and out through the mouth is because we are over breathing. We are voluntarily hyperventilating, and there is no issues with voluntary hyperventilation that we know of yet. I'll come on to that in a minute. Acute voluntary hyperventilation is fine. Too much hyperventilation creates problems and carbon dioxide sensitivity. This I would love to make this my next study, is testing people's BOLT score, which is basically a measure of carbon dioxide sensitivity after conscious connected breathing, and see if there is any problems there, if there is an increase from doing all that voluntary hyperventilation, and then subsequent to that, how much oxygen advantage type exercises do you need to mitigate that response? Because with all of these, with anything like good, there's always like a consequence. So, with ayahuasca or psilocybin, people are like, there's no side effects, nothing can go wrong, it's absolutely fine, there are no risks. And obviously people are lying, and they're just trying to push their agenda of getting legalization of psychedelics and ayahuasca. But there are downsides. That stuff has to be processed by the liver. You do see raised liver enzymes. You do see brain inflammation after those things. I've obviously done a fair few psychedelic retreats and an apprenticeship down in Peru with the Shipibo tribe. And after ayahuasca, I get headaches for days now.
Really?
I can't do it really anymore because I get such big brain inflammation.
Do you think it's because your brain is just creating such vivid psychedelic realizations and all that, such brain activity?
I think it's, a few things. I think it's, inflammation created in the brain, but one, because your brain is working on overdrive, and then you obviously need to rest very, very hard after that. So there are side effects, but now for me, the sort of, I've got diminishing returns now. Like I have friends who always like, do more ayahuasca. It's like, no, I've done enough. I've, as Alan Watts said, like once you get the message, hang up the phone. I've got the message. I've gotten everything I want from psychedelics. Now I'm focused on breath work. And this is why I chose to study breath work and not ayahuasca, which I was really considering doing my PhD on ayahuasca, is because I think there is more application to it. Our breath work you can just do from the comfort of your home. A lot of people are never going to do ayahuasca because, one, it's brutal on the body, the vomiting, the shitting yourself, the headaches.
That's the
and
thing
things.
too.
Yeah. Oh, big time. Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah. I had one session where I did, it was the Colombian tradition, which they really emphasized the purge and the physical stuff. And I counted, I went to the bathroom 18 times in 14 hours. And it was just like, it was like glass going through me. It was brutal, but they say that was good for me, but who knows?
Did you feel good
sorry?
after?
Yeah, I did. It was an amazing experience, but that was a particularly hard physical one. I prefer the Brazilian tradition because I find it's more, a lot more visuals, a lot more easy on the body. But different people have different drinks for different needs, as Ricky Gervais would say. Yeah, where was I? Breathwork, yeah, mouth breathing. What is conscious connected breathing? Sorry for being so tangential there. You want to breathe in and out through your mouth so you can get that increased volume. It's harder to get that amount of volume that you need for conscious connected breathing through the nose because there is that resistance and that filtration. The other thread that runs through conscious connected breathing is it's connected. It's in the name. Normally we breathe with a pause, especially after the exhale. Here we are removing the pause. And then the last thing, or the last couple of things is like, the inhale is longer than the exhale. So that again activates the sympathetic response. When we're breathing with our exhale longer than our inhale, that tends to activate sort of the rest and digest portion. And the other thread that runs through conscious connected breathing is that there's this intention of healing with it. It's this intention of it being a kind of therapy. And that's what I'm most interested in. So my study is for people with anxiety, and we want to see if this changes anxiety. And you mentioned trauma earlier. So conscious connected breathing, there was one study, I think it's 2012, Moraes, Cruz and DeWitt, and they found that, it resolved PTSD in one person who had PTSD. But there's a clinical case study. It was only one person, which is, it's not nothing, but it's not a randomized control trial with 100 people, etc.
Amazing.
But trauma, I have a little bit of an issue with trauma. I have PTSD. I've had 2 diagnoses of PTSD. I've had 2 QEEGs that show you have PTSD. I don't know if this is me just gatekeeping and wanting to protect my sort of special status as someone with an actual diagnosis or 2 diagnoses of PTSD. But I feel like it's being abused, this whole term of trauma. I feel like Gabor Mate is to blame for this, just telling everyone they have trauma. And I don't agree with that. I agree with like the likes of Bessel van der Kolk and Bruce Parry that no, not everyone has trauma. And a lot of people resolve trauma really easily. Just because there was like a potential traumatic incident doesn't mean that people have PTSD. Very interestingly, after the Vietnam War, a lot of the American military came back, and huge problems with PTSD, huge problems today in society, still lingering from Vietnam. But they don't have those same issues in Vietnam. They were in the same war, but they don't have those same levels of PTSD. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Connection, family. They perceive it as a victory, whereas Americans maybe they felt like they weren't victorious. But the other point there is like, you can experience the same event and one person can have PTSD and another person can be completely fine. It's not the event that creates the PTSD. And that's where Gabor Mate starts to veer off and take things way too far and say, like, PTSD can happen from bad things that did happen, like a car crash or a war or sexual abuse, as well as good things that should have happened but didn't, like having a father. You know, that he would say that that's traumatic, but I would say that's not traumatic. It's terrible. You know, my father left when I was pretty young. I don't think that's traumatizing. That changed me for sure. You know, that was a bad thing that I wish didn't happen, but it's not trauma. Trauma is something else. And you know, if we say everything is trauma, then nothing is trauma. Trauma has to be something like out of the ordinary, something that's like not supposed to happen. Like being in a war zone, sexual abuse, not supposed to happen. Fathers, you could say, you know, not supposed to happen either, but it's a lot more common, basically. And yeah, I agree with Bruce Parry and his idea that there needs to be 3 E's for there to be trauma. There has to be an experience, an event, and an effect. And there has to be a lasting change to the stress response system. And I don't know how you can have a change in the stress response system to an absent father, like certainly because there's no singular event there. So I feel like this is me agreeing with Jules Evans. I don't know if you know Jules Evans, but he's a kind of philosopher. He's written a lot about psychedelics and things. And he's like, people in the wellness industry, we just get fixated on things. At the moment, it's trauma. All we want to talk about is trauma. Everyone's got trauma, whether it's ancestral trauma or trauma from a teacher telling you off or trauma from someone having a different political opinion to you. And everything is caused by trauma. And once we all heal our trauma, no one will have any more problems. And psychedelics are going to do that all for us. I feel like that is it, right? But I don't think that's the case. I think there are so many causes of anxiety. There are so many causes of depression, and there are so many other things that should be focused on as well. And yeah, that's my piece on trauma.
Once I read that Bessel van der Kolk book, I truly understood, wow, I do not have trauma. You know, shout out everyone that was in that book. Shout out the research studies, that huge study that they did. Incredible. Okay, this breath work. Now, we can't help, though, our anxiety. And I want to do a bit more of, man, that was so good. I almost forgot what we were talking about. But the breath work with the anxiety and the stress in our daily lives. These sessions that you're doing, they're 90 minutes long, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So it's about 40 to 50 minutes of actual breathing, and then other bits either side.
And would this be something that people do every day?
Yes. So I give people in the study a 10-minute recording to do every day. And I think that's about the sweet spot for a practice that's not going to affect your carbon dioxide tolerance. But as I say, I really want to do a study and testing that. Unfortunately, we don't have the really, capnometer. I've been in conversation with a company who are making capnometers or developing them, a cheap and accessible one that we can actually measure people's carbon dioxide. Once that's available, maybe I'll try and get some funding to do that research and see how much conscious connected breathing affects CO2. But yeah, 10 minutes a day, I would say is a good amount, plus then one sort of longer 40, 50-minute session.
Because I do the 10 minutes a day breath work, and my day has instantly shifted. Once running thoughts have now turned into a day of constructed thoughts and productivity and relaxation. I used to do Wim Hof every day. I now do Shit Shakti pranayama. So I'm swinging my arms back and forth while I'm actually just nasal breathing. And then sometimes I get the mouth involved, which always feels nice. I think I learned in that Oxygen Advantage book, when people take big breaths, they don't feel relaxed because they're saturating their body with oxygen. They feel relaxed because they're stretching their lungs, and that provides a relaxing effect, But the practical use, I want to get into what people can do every day, because these benefits are so amazing. You're talking about releasing of anxiety, switching on. Let's go a bit more on the benefits of this breathing, because there's so many.
Yeah. So if we go back to conscious connected breathing, and yes, it can heal trauma, but that's not what I'm studying in my my clinical case study. Sorry, my randomized control trial. What it can do really effectively is help us process emotions. So going into EMDR, I don't know if you know EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. So this is a type of therapy developed, I think, here in the Bay Area by Francine Shapiro, a psychotherapist. And she noticed that when she would go walking with her clients in the hills, they would be able to talk about things that they just couldn't talk about when they were sat in a room with a psychotherapist. And yeah, you might get me veering onto why I don't like psychotherapy or why I stopped studying psychotherapy and started becoming a researcher. Well, because the outcomes are not very good, basically.
Psychotherapy? What's that
like
again?
Psychotherapy, counseling, therapy, talk therapy.
Oh, actually, Richard,
yeah. So
I'm sorry, we have to go a little bit into the talk therapy because I have my stances against it as well. Someone with personal experience. Just 2 seconds. Do you want to go into that?
Yeah. Well, quickly, I mean, my background is as a therapist. So I have a postgraduate certificate in psychotherapy, and I chose not to get licensed and become a researcher because I found there is very poor evidence for psychotherapy certainly for things like anxiety. So CBT and anxiety has a response rate of 40%. So only 40% of people who go for anxiety treatment, CBT, get any benefit. And of those 40%, I think another 2/3 relapse very soon after. So it's just not very good for anxiety. And this is the problem. You know, we don't have good treatments for mental health, unfortunately. And there is this I feel like there's this collusion. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a collusion. It's basically everyone is bought in to this idea of it's not your fault, basically, if you have depression. I had depression, I had anxiety, I had all sorts of issues. Everyone wants to buy into the chemical imbalance theory that has been thankfully blown out of the water, but everyone got to buy into that, because if you just tell someone it's just a chemical imbalance in their brain, then the parents who may have abused that child or raised them, not been good enough parents, don't have to take responsibility. The person who maybe is just a mess in their life and hasn't been, isn't taking any responsibility, continues to have to just outsource responsibility to a pill. The doctor who knows how poor outcomes are for psychotherapy and things like that doesn't have to feel bad, doesn't have to sit in front of someone and say, oh yeah, sorry, there isn't really any good medication for mental health issues. Take this pill. They actually get to feel useful, and everyone got to buy into it. And that's why I think it worked for so long. And that's why I think it's taking so long to die off. But I just feel like, mental health is so complex and so complicated. And, that is why I'm doing research on breathwork, and that's why I'm so excited about psychedelics and non-ordinary states of consciousness for healing, because they have much better results. Will they have as incredible results as everyone thinks? I don't think so. The stock exchange or the stock index that I follow for the psychedelic market is down about 20% this year. I think because people are realizing the hype is, it's hype. They're effective, but they're probably not going to change the world. They're not going to cure everyone.
Interesting.
So we do need to keep moving in the right direction and keep exploring things and being open to the fact that, maybe my breathwork trial doesn't work. We'll see what happens. And I'll be very open if I don't see changes in people's anxiety and lasting changes. And that was one of the reasons, I think, for the stock market going down, or the stock index of psychedelics going down, is because from those initial trials on psilocybin that showed like a 70% reduction in treatment-resistant depression and PTSD, a lot of those people just got depression and PTSD coming back a year or so later. So it wasn't like this one or done type thing. But that's fine. I mean, that's better than talk therapy. That's better than SSRIs. It just means that you have to go and maybe once a year, maybe you go back for another ceremony. Unfortunately, quite tragic for these people who are involved in that trial, can't now get access to therapy, certainly not in the UK or at Imperial's lab where they did that research, because it's still illegal there.
Interesting. Wow. But we know we have an alternative to the loophole of just talking through things. Here's a pill that didn't work. Let's dose again. Let's try MAOI inhibitor. Let's do all these things, SSRI, blah. Let's do something that we can do every day, which is why I love this 10-minute approach breath work. And then the occasional 45-minute. I absolutely love that because we can
Yeah.
alter our states,
Yeah.
right? Every single day. That's amazing.
Right. Yes. Let me finish the thought that I abandoned earlier. So why conscious connected breathing? Why I think it's got such potential. And it going back to the start of when we started talking transient hypofrontality. So this is my hypothesis, not my hypothesis, Reinwein and Williams' hypothesis from 2007. And basically the reason why talk therapy isn't effective for things like trauma is because when we're talking, we're accessing the prefrontal cortex. That is our most evolved part of our brain. That is the most rational part of our brain. But trauma and emotions are stored in the amygdala, and they are stored in the body and the nervous system. And you can't access the body and the nervous system with the prefrontal cortex. So tying this in with the hemoglobin and the Bohr effect, when we do this voluntary hyperventilation in conscious connected breathing, we are over breathing. We're getting our blood oxygen saturation up to about 100%. The hemoglobin is holding on to the oxygen, not releasing it to the area of the brain that normally gets preferential treatment, the prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex gets down regulated. So one of the jobs of the prefrontal cortex is to protect us and to suppress things that are painful and protect us from pain. And our emotions are painful as well. And when we turn down that prefrontal cortex, that protective mechanism, those emotions can surface. They can come up for reprocessing. And that is what EMDR, again, going back to EMDR, that is EMDR, eye movement, reprocessing, deprogramming and reprocessing. I've forgotten what it is now. But basically, we want to be reprocessing maladaptively stored memories. That's what Francine Shapiro says is the cause of trauma, is our memories get stuck as procedural memories rather than episodic memories. And EMDR can reprocess these memories into episodic memories, and breath work as well, conscious connected breathing, can help us to get into that state where we reprocess our memories. And often I'll see people when they are doing the breathing and their eyes are going back and forwards like they're dreaming, even though they're pretty much awake. And if tying this into Matthew Walker and why we sleep, his saying is, there's that saying, time heals all wounds. And Matthew Walker says, no, time in REM sleep heals all wounds, because that is where we are reprocessing our difficult emotions, our maladaptively stored emotions. But we can get into this kind of dreaming whilst awake state with things like ayahuasca, psilocybin, and conscious connected breathing. So yeah, a cause of anxiety and depression is maladaptively stored memories, and we can store these correctly or appropriately through these breathwork experiences.
Freaking incredible, dude. I have never heard that part about breathwork. I didn't understand the whole releasing of this emotional baggage by turning off the PFC. That is freaking incredible, man. Thank you for that. That's awesome. And we can do that almost every day, you're saying?
Yes. The reason you haven't heard about it is because I kind of came up with it, and that's sort of the hypothesis for my PhD. Wow. But hopefully it turns out to be true. And it's obviously not my original work. It's tying together all sorts of different people's work: Matthew Walker, Reinwein Williams, DeWitt, Maurice Cruz, all these people. That's what academia is about, is, standing on the shoulders of giants, as Sir Isaac Newton would say. So I'm going to take a smidgen of credit, but 99% of it is me borrowing other people's work. But yes, you can do that every day, but you don't necessarily want to be doing it every day, because integration is the hot word in wellness and ayahuasca and things like that. When we are doing these big ceremonies, it's a bit like taking a glass of river water. And when you get that river water, it's really, cloudy and muddy and peaty and silty. And then after a few minutes, the water separates and the silt and the peat goes down to the bottom and the water becomes really clear. When we're doing the breath work, we're stirring stuff up. So we want to let things settle, and doing integration practices like journaling, like talking to a therapist or an integration coach, or to a friend, or walking in nature, or just meditating, or float tanks. Those are all practices you can do to integrate what comes up in that stirring of the river.
So talking would be good after a session like that, but not necessarily the first step of trying
Yeah.
to uncover some of these emotional baggage and trauma related triggers, we could say.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, Peter Levine would say it's only the ego that wants to understand things. To heal from trauma and things like that, doesn't matter what happens as long as we release it. It could be pre-verbal stuff, it can be birth trauma and things like that. As long as you're releasing it, as long as you're feeling the emotion, allowing that process to complete, you are healing. There's no real need to go, well, this happened because my mother, etc., or this happened because I was dropped on my head or something like that. It doesn't matter as long as you're doing the actual work to release the stuff.
Let's say I do my video every day. What do you prefer, or what do you recommend that's something we could do every day for 10 minutes? Is there a video that we go to or something in that nature?
Yeah, so my mentor is Alan Dolan, the breath guru. He has an app. It's just called Breath Guru, and he has guided breathwork sessions there. But this technique is really difficult, and it's good that it's difficult, because we wouldn't want to slip into this type of breathing and go into sort of psychedelic states when we're driving a car. You do need a coach, really. You do need to go to a workshop or work one-to-one with someone to be able to get into the conscious connected breathing, because it's so weird. Some people, it takes months for people to get that technique. It feels so unnatural, and if you don't have a coach, I've never seen anyone get it naturally. It's really peculiar. So yeah, absolutely, you can book in with me for one-to-one sessions. You can go apply to be a part of the trial. You can go to the Breath Guru, I think it's breathguru.net or breathguru.com, Alan Dolan. He's a pretty famous breath worker, and book in with him. And you can just look up as well on his website. He's got loads of trainees as well, because he has a training school that my wife is a teacher at, and book in with someone local to you. Obviously, I'm doing a trial online, so I think conscious connected breathing is effective online, but some people, there are benefits to doing it in person. When you do it in person, people do things like acupressure and that kind of stuff.
Okay,
can be nice.
what about all the ones I see on YouTube? I just look up something in the morning, I find a nice Wim Hof. People are like 5-minute breath hold, or swing your arms left and right. That stuff's pretty effective. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think those are great practices for different purposes. So the conscious connected breathing, as I say, is about, working on the causes of your stress and anxiety, whereas those types of things I would say are managing the symptoms of anxiety. So down regulating the nervous system, increasing vagal nerve tone, which increases your tolerance of stress. All great, yeah, and important, and I absolutely do those things. Soma breathwork, I'm also a trainer of Soma breathwork. So that's Niraj Naik. He is
correct?
I don't know if it could be the Institute. I don't know if it's the Soma Institute. It's just called Soma Breathwork, but he's AKA the Renegade Pharmacist. He's a British Asian guy. So he kind of he was like a disciple. No, I don't know the word disciple. He used to work with Wim Hof, and then he kind of created, with his sort of Indian background, brought in more of the pranayama, kind of combined the pranayama with the tumo to create something really cool and quite sciencey as well, which I like. And if you go on YouTube, especially, I think there's a friend of mine called Evolution of Dave. He does loads of
I love that guy. I freaking love him. Do you know him?
Guy, yeah.
Oh
I
my
do,
gosh.
Yeah.
What a character.
Yeah,
I love
bloke.
his digestion breathwork video. I don't know if you've seen that. He's inhale a bit and then straw it out for as long as you can. My food just goes right through. Anyways, this is epic. There's so many functions for breathwork. Letting everything out, these natural restoration processes. I love it. We keep on bringing up psychedelics. I say, let's go into that. But one more thing, because I'm always into athletic performance. And we know that if we can get this CO2 tolerance up, correct, we can become better athletes, better able to facilitate the use of oxygen into our tissues and muscles. How can we start maybe one practice before a match or after? Because I know when I do breathwork before tennis, I'm freaking lights out. And if I don't, I'm winded. Do you have any tips or recommendations on how to perform better in sports?
Yeah, I guess there's two things there. One, in terms of like sports related performance anxiety, nose breathing. You know, when people say, like, Patrick Ewan was sharing a story, he was about to do like a really big talk and he was quite
Oh
nervous
yeah,
about it. And someone producer came up to him and was like, "Don't worry, Patrick, you're going to be fine. Just take a deep breath." And he was like, "I am not taking a deep breath."
yeah.
In his accent, he was like, "No, I'm going into my nasal breathing and I'm going to breathe really light, slow and deep." So yeah, breathe light, slow and deep. If you have performance related anxiety, don't overbreathe. Breathe slow, accentuate the exhale. So maybe go for like a 4, in for 4, out for 8. Or you can even do some of that cadence breathing, like the 1-1-2-1 breathing. Slowing the breathing down as much as possible with a really long exhale is going to improve your focus for tennis or speaking or CrossFit. And then a nice warm up that I like to do in CrossFit is on the assault bike, is just in the warm up doing like a minute on the assault bike and then holding the breath, pinching the nose, holding the breath for like 6 pedals, and then going back into nasal breathing. So you're creating that tolerable air hunger and just increasing that tolerance over time. And you can do that for 5 minutes, 5 rounds, cycle for a minute at like 60%, rate of perceived as exertion, and then hold for 6 pedals. And then next round, see if you can go to 7 rotations of the pedal. Next round, go to 8 rotations of the pedal, and then recover in the rest of that minute. And you can do that with anything. If you're jogging, just go, okay, I'm going to hold my nose for 7 steps, or I'm going to do 16 steps. Obviously don't do it so far that you're going to fall over. It's got to be tolerable air hunger. And this is a big problem with Wim Hof and things like that, is people do stupid stuff like doing breath work in water and things like that. No, don't ever do breath work in water.
Actually, it's coming up in so much social media for me now, people dying doing this Wim Hof stuff. What's going on there really quick?
Yeah, so again, it comes back to the Bohr effect and the carbon dioxide. So when you're doing Wim Hof, you're blowing off your carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is your signal to inhale. So when people do free diving with Wim Hof, which you must not do, is you go down to a really deep depth, you're diving around in a cave, and the body starts to send out signals. Hey, we're running low on oxygen. We're running low on oxygen. But the first and most important signal, not the first signal for breath is there air flowing in and out through the esophagus. And once that signal is not there, the body starts to look for carbon dioxide. And if there's no carbon dioxide because you've blown it all off, you're not going to have time to get back to the surface. So people go do this free diving and then they just stay down there because they didn't get the signal. So when people are free diving, the real technique is more like the cadence breathing, more like slowing down the heart rate so much with nasal breathing, with long exhales. That's how you become an effective free diver. And any good free diver knows that. If you've ever done a free diving like training or anything like that, which I've only done once, they're like, no, we don't do Wim Hof. Absolutely 100%. That is, it's like a death sentence. Please don't do that.
And for everyday life too, where should we be focusing when we're breathing naturally? Should we be focusing on our nose, our esophagus? What's the key?
So if you're doing like a mindfulness-based practice, it's just about mindfulness. It's just about being present in that moment. And for some, if you do follow Headspace and Andy Puddicombe, he would say wherever you feel comfortable. If you feel comfortable focusing on the movement of your belly, go for that. If you feel like you want to focus on the air coming in and out through your nose, go for that. So I'd say if your question's about mindfulness, it doesn't really matter. But I would say just in terms of functional breathing, just thinking about making sure we are breathing with our diaphragm, so our belly is moving, as well as our chest should be coming out, and our ribs as well should be going out to the side. So just getting that full breath. So I wouldn't say like focus on any one point. I would just say make sure that there isn't one point that you're missing. So a lot of people are upper chest breathers, so then we say, okay, you need to breathe down into your belly. Some people are belly breathers, and we say, okay, we need to see some movement in the chest and the ribs. So we want to see the breath where it's not.
Right.
Basically.
And it's funny you mentioned the ribs. I remember doing a test with my buddy. He gave me a SpO2 monitor or measurement, and my ribs were just not moving. And even when he was doing testing on NFL players, he would touch the ribs and go, all right, breathe. None of them were really expanding their diaphragm. So it just shows there's a lot of training we need to do. And I'm glad we now have guys like you, and we can look into research and we can start doing daily practices or even a research study to get down to the root cause, throw away the fucking pills, and do some real work. Now, before we go into psychedelics, you were a freaking toned ass male model for Men's Health. Where did that all begin? Fitness, let's just go right into it. How did you become a male model?
Just really vain and insecure as a young person.
Biohacking.
I mean, yeah. I had issues, body issues. I had depression and anxiety, and I thought, oh yeah, the reason girls don't like me is because I'm not, super shredded. And
this was
and
the most unexpected answer, by the way. So keep it going.
Yeah.
Keep it going.
Okay. And yeah, I started noticing that when I built up my body, people gave me more attention, and, just like everyone on social media, we want attention basically. So, I also had a family that really valued looks, to an extreme extent and an unhealthy extent. And, I fell into that trap and thought, oh, okay, I'll get my family's approval by, the ultimate approval in my mind was being paid for how you look. And, from a kind of young age, I got into fitness, doing press ups and pull ups and, going to the gym, and then went into university and found real interest in building up my body, and again getting attention from women. Actually, you get more attention from guys than girls when you're in good shape. And I thought as well, I had like severe anxiety and depression, and I thought once I achieved, the reason I have anxiety and depression is because I'm not good enough, and once I prove I'm good enough in whatever way I decide, I'll be happy. And I thought the ultimate proof of that would be being in Men's Health and being a fitness model. And of course I did that, and then became even more depressed because I achieved that thing. I was like, oh, why am I still depressed? Why am I still anxious? Then I obviously switched to psychology and things like that.
Wow. Did you have some crazy diet, eating just chicken and 9 times a day? How was the whole lifestyle?
Yeah, so there was a thing back in the day called the Velocity diet. So T Nation was where I used to get all of my information. This was a kind of bodybuilding website. And the Velocity diet was basically like 5 protein shakes a day, plus a little bit of almond butter and a fiber supplement. And that was how I got sort of into shape for these photo shoots. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, doing that for about a month plus, obviously working out, playing a lot of squash with my friends. And carb depletion just before, and carb replenishment, dehydration, those kinds of things just before.
Holy cow!
Preparation H on my abs
right.
as well.
Wait, what's that?
Preparation H is a hemorrhoid cream that shrinks hemorrhoids, but if you put it basically sucks in water, and if you put it on your abs or your pecs, it increases your definition. So yeah, those are the kind of embarrassing things I used to do to get attention, basically.
Right. What would you say now to people who want to get into the modeling scene or the fitness scene, and maybe they're doing it because they have insecurities and they're doing it solely for that reason? Do you have any tips for that?
Well, I would say, really work out your motivation. If you are depressed and anxious and you think being a model is going to make that any better, it will make it much, much worse, because you're surrounded by other people who have the same sort of insecurities and maybe hyper focus on the way they look rather than how they feel inside. So, go for it. We need models, I don't think we need models, but there's a demand for models. But yeah, maybe also work with a therapist to see if there are underlying issues that you may be papering over the cracks with, a successful modeling career. And it's not just modeling, businessmen and athletes, so many of these people, they're distracting themselves from, deep wounding, deep insecurities, those kinds of things.
Maybe some breathwork too, huh? Maybe we need to look into that. I also noticed you are into biohacking when it comes to the technology and the data. You're a breath geek. You also seem like a data geek. I want to walk through, this is always my most, fun topic. I want to walk through just a day in the life of Richard, kind of highlighting the biohacking aspects of it. What's it like?
Yeah. So Andrew Huberman, I'm sure you know him. He's kind of the
Who is
king
that?
of podcasts, health and spirit. No, you never heard of him. You should listen to him. Anyway, yeah, I like what he says. First thing in the morning. So I ideally don't wake up with an alarm. Really give yourself sleep opportunity. I have the Aura Ring to track my sleep. That's my favorite one. There are other brands out there. You got yours, nice, Jack. I think the best thing that Aura Ring does is highlights to people they're not getting nearly as much sleep as they actually think. They're like, I get my 8 hours in bed. But it's like, you're in bed for 8 hours, but then you're 15 minutes falling asleep. You wake up in the night a couple of times, loads of micro awakenings, and actually you're getting like 6 hours of sleep. So I think, just getting sleep opportunities.
Let's do a little sleep. Hold on. Sorry. Micro awakenings. How is that caused? Light, noise, like a little bit of those. What are those like?
Yeah, so they are often like subperceptual. So they're just like your body just checking everything is okay. And this, I think, is related to social issues and security and safety. And certainly for me, I've had a lot of sleep issues. I don't have a big family. I don't have, a lot of sort of physical protectors around me. And the people who have the fewest micro awakenings in the world are the Amish, because they have family, they have society, they know their neighbors, they just know that they are safe. So I think these micro awakenings is like our nervous system being like, am I safe? And if you feel super safe because you know your neighbor's got your back, you don't need to wait.
That's crazy. I noticed that this is maybe a weird comment, but I was in the city of Chicago and I saw Amish people, and they are very built, like their whole facial development and just how tall they were. And there was like at least 6 of them that I saw. I was thinking, man, that's a lot of sleep and a whole bunch of other things. But side comment,
Yes.
that's real interesting. The micro awakenings. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, then back to the routine. Morning sunlight, first thing in the morning, I let my dog out, which I got to help me sleep, apart from other things. Yes, she's improved my sleep. And that is another thing that shows clinical significance is if you can hear a dog snoring, that's a signal to your nervous system that you're safe, because you know that dog's got your back and is going to bark if anyone tries to intrude. So first thing in the morning sunlight in the eyes for about 5 minutes, signaling to the suprachiasmatic nucleus behind the eyes, it's morning, stop producing melatonin, start producing cortisol. Cortisol is good, by the way, in the right amounts. Cortisol is often demonized, but cortisol, we need cortisol, we need anxiety. Anxiety is good, but cortisol doesn't cause anxiety. Chronic cortisol, high levels of cortisol is a problem. And cortisol is what wakes us up in the morning. Then next thing, I will go and have water. So a live water. I think they deliver down in Austin. You in Austin, Jack? I'm
3 hours away from Austin. I'm in Dallas, but I'm there.
Dallas. Okay, nice.
Almost every other month. Yeah.
Okay, nice. Well, live water. So I get they deliver spring water to me in nice glass bottles.
Amazing.
And I have a big glass of that with some molecular hydrogen. So molecular hydrogen is basically a free radical scavenger. I also put some Kington hypertonic in there, so they're like sea minerals. Then I take some methylene blue. So methylene blue helps with the electron transport chain, gives energy. And then I go into my red light and I do oxygen advantage training in front of the red light for about 10 minutes. And then I also have my PEMF device. This is the Halo PEMF. I have that around my feet. Pulse electromagnetic frequency is like grounding on steroids, decreases inflammation, speeds up healing, and things like that. What sold me on PMF is they use it on horses, on race horses, $1 million race horses. They will put PEMF devices on them to speed up when they have injuries and things like that. So obviously the horses don't know what a placebo effect is or what PMF is, but it speeds up their healing. So it must be doing something. Then I use a Theragun and a rapid release, basically like self-massage. I got double gunning my body to make sure I'm ready for the day. Then what do I do? Yeah, well, go and brush my teeth, oil pulling, tongue scraping, flossing, Alitura and Young Goose products. Then I'm drinking Update Energy at the moment. I
Love
don't know if
that
you heard of
drink.
Update.
Absolutely love that drink.
Yes. So that's the paraxanthine, which is the caffeine metabolite that's like caffeine without the side effects. And then over the course of the day, I've got a hyperbaric oxygen chamber. I'll go grab my laptop and I'll take that inside the hyperbaric oxygen chamber and do my emails and work inside of there, take phone calls in there. And then, what else? Go about the day, sauna, red light, sort of at afternoon after. Obviously I do CrossFit and I'll train there, and then for recovery, sauna and ice bath in sort of the afternoons and evenings, and then nighttime, sort of chilling out, eating with my wife, stretching whilst watching TV, using GoWOD at the moment. I'm very immobile. That's sort of my biggest weakness in CrossFit. So I use GoWOD. So I do about an hour of mobility whilst watching whatever on Netflix, and then bedtime. Blue light blocking glasses, no light from above, because as you know, the whole Zeitgeber thing, I only want lamps around our, below our waist, because, if our nervous system perceives light from coming from above our heads, as we evolved to be modern humans, or prior to being modern humans, the only light source would have been the sun. So that's a sort of signal to your nervous system. Oh, the sun's still up. Don't start producing melatonin. Don't start sleeping. So lights below the waist. Obviously, no phone before the last hour, but not just because of the blue light, but because it's just so stimulating and will just keep us in the beta brain waves. And then, sleep supplements. I take a few. Kava. I'm loving Kava at the moment. True Kava.
Oh, you use True Kava at sleep. Yeah. Okay, I love True Kava. Love Feel Free. I wouldn't take a Feel Free before bed though. No way. But
no,
fucking energizing. Not. You take the True Kava before bed. Interesting. Do you use the shots?
I've got the cans as well as like a dropper.
Oh, you use the dropper. I love that dropper. I've really got into CBD as well. Elemental CBD.
Yeah.
Ben Greenfield's. He didn't make that.
Yeah, Element. Yeah, they're big doses. Yeah, I really like Cured. Cured is my sort of current one because it tastes much better, and they've got really high concentrations of CBN, which is the cannabinoid that is sort of supposed to be most indicated for sleep.
Oh man, this sounds like my dream day for biohacking. That's freaking incredible. Starting with the H2 and everything. Love all of that. You said you're in CrossFit. And you owned one of the biggest CrossFit gyms in Orange County, California. What? How was that like? How's the gym scene? CrossFit world? What's up with that?
Yeah. So again, it's not as cool as it sounds. Basically, I always wanted to live in California, and I inherited a little bit of money in my 20s, and I was like, right, well, I'm going to go move to California, and it's much harder to get into the US than you might think. You can't just walk across the border. Even as a British person, if we walked across the border, maybe they think that we're invading again or something. But we have to get visas, and it's really hard. So to do that, I bought a business. I bought a CrossFit gym, and at that time, I was into like bodybuilding, and I was going to Equinox and stuff, and I was doing a bit of modeling and that kind of stuff. But then I was really like, I love to compete, so I used to play a lot of soccer, rugby, and field hockey, and I just got so many injuries basically from just playing too many sports. And then I kind of realized that I could combine my passion for competition with my love of lifting weights. And I bought a CrossFit gym really before I'd really gotten into it. And then I moved over here. It was just way too much for me. I bought a really nice gym, really nice members and stuff, but I was like 28 years old. I was a kid. I was immature. I just moved to a new country. My now wife had her visa rejected twice, so I couldn't see her in the US. So I used to have to travel to Canada or like back to the UK just to see her. And it was just way too much for me. And I just freaked out and panicked and sold the business after a year and moved back to the UK for about 5 years. I'm now back in California several years later, but only a CrossFit gym. is really hard. I go to Diablo CrossFit out here and they do an amazing job, but I know that, yeah, it's hard work. You know, I thought it was going to be like working out on the beach and surfing every day, but really it was like dealing with leaking toilets and unhappy customers and staff members who'd forgotten to turn up for class and things like that.
Wow. How's competing at those games? How do you train for all the CrossFit stuff? Really?
Yeah, so the CrossFit Games is sort of like the Olympics. You know, that's for the world's best. I'm not at that level. I'm sort of amateur. I'm trying to get to sort of like semi-professional. So I compete in competitions for money. Haven't won any money yet. I've won competitions, but they, you know, you get like a gift bag. But my goal is to win some actual money. Yeah, you have to train pretty hard to do that. You have to. For me, it's about like managing injuries because it is a sport. You know, that's what people criticize CrossFit because they're like, oh, the injury rate's really high. It's like, yeah, but it's lower than soccer. It's lower than racquetball. It's lower than tennis. It's lower than rugby. It's higher than just going to the gym and doing your bro reps. But that's not what CrossFit is about. CrossFit is a sport. It's the sport of fitness. And some people get into good shape through it. But really, it's a test of fitness. And yeah, I have to do a lot of mobility and things like that just to stay
Do you have a
healthy.
whole, you mentioned some of your recovery. Do you have any other, weekly massage or, I don't know, super long breath work or ketones, anything else? Oh, yeah.
Peptides? You into
Oh, yeah.
peptides?
What's up
Yeah.
with the peptides?
Yeah. Oh, I love the peptides. BPC 157, TB 500, managing the injuries. Yeah, big time. Epitolon
Mm.
for decalcifying the pineal gland. I don't know if that is actually a thing, but that's one of these sort of fringe ayahuasca things that people say, like, oh yeah, he's got a calcified pineal
Holy
gland,
couch him, right?
you know. But you're talking shit about people in the spiritual circles. Supposedly, Epitolon can decalcify the pineal gland. I don't know if that's true, but what it can do is sort of upregulate the pineal gland and improve deep sleep and things like
Yeah.
that.
Okay. You do those three? Do you do anything else?
Yeah. What else do I do? NAD. It's not a peptide, but NAD patches. So I used to do the IVs, which I hate IVs. I hate needles, especially in my veins. So now there is a company. Let me just find it. Sorry,
And
NAD.
Greenfield sponsors it, huh?
Yeah, Iron
Iron
Layer.
layer. Yeah.
That's the one. Iron Layer. They are awesome because they send you a patch and it's called iontophoresis. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but basically you get like a gram of NAD and you just stick it on a patch on a hairless part of your body and wear that for 14 hours and it gets the NAD into the body. Because this is the problem with NAD. It's a really big molecule, so we don't digest it very well. If you listen to the Young Goose, he talks about NAD in skin products and it's just way too big to fit through our pores. So in the Young Goose products, they use like the precursors like NMR and things like that to upregulate NAD in the skin. But yeah, iontophoresis is a way of getting it into the body and I really like that as
That's
well.
amazing. I have to ask this question. This is a lot of expensive stuff. How are you budgeting all of this?
I have a side hustle, you know. I have a real estate company, so yeah, all my
That's what's
profits
up.
go into
I'm in real
biohacking.
estate as
Yeah,
well, and let me tell you,
yeah,
you can get one or two biohacks out of real estate. What?
yeah. I really think there needs to be like a biohacking home consultant. I feel like I could do that. You know, go to people's house and be like, change these light bulbs. You've got mold
Dude, need
here.
it.
You know, get these air filters. Yeah, let's use this type of low VOC
Ooh,
pen.
we can get into some hygiene. I mean, I'm sure you filter your water and your air. I got air doctors everywhere. I got the O2 pure air. Do you have any of those things? That light's from On Charge.
Yeah,
You into that?
Bon Charge, yeah, I like them. Yeah, I have Bon Charge lights in my bedroom, the red lights, and the Air Doctor as well. Yeah, I use those all the time, and just getting fresh air in as much as possible. You know, it's just so long as you don't live in a big city, right? You know, where there's loads of pollution, just getting air moving through prevents mold, and, prevents the inside air from becoming so toxic. There was one study that showed that indoor air pollution was 42 times worse than outdoor pollution, because of, especially with things like new furniture and paint and things like that.
I gotta turn on the fan after you said that. Okay.
Yeah.
This has been freaking incredible, Richard. We've learned so much going on from breathwork, all the amazing aspects, the different genres of breathwork, from practical and functional breathing to therapeutic, all the way to being a model, and benefits and pros and cons. Not too many pros, maybe. We went into your biohacking. And lastly, I want to tie back that breathwork piece with the psychedelic aspect of it. All the new research coming out, I mean, it's taken the world by storm. Let's get into maybe the ones that you've worked on or have done. And yeah, let's start there. What are the ones you've got in them, and what are the differences of them?
Oh, so what are the different psychedelic drugs you can take?
There's so many. We can't name them all, but I want to focus on the ones that you have done and you know about.
Yeah. So ayahuasca would be the main one that I've experienced with. I did a little apprenticeship down in Peru with the Shipibo tribe at the Ayahuasca Foundation. And yeah, I'm not a practitioner. I'm not a medicine pourer, as they say. I would be very skeptical of anyone pouring medicine. I would be extremely skeptical, in fact, of anyone who has not done many, many years of apprenticeships down in South America. They say it's sort of equivalent to a medical degree. To become a doctor takes at least 7 years in the West, and that is about as long as the training should be for ayahuasca. I've done a month, and that was enough for me to realize, wow, I'm completely out of my depth here. I'm going to leave this to more highly trained people. I'm just a researcher, and I'll do my best from that perspective, because it is just so enormous. Ayahuasca is just, I'd say it's the only thing I've ever experienced that exceeded my expectations. So everything in life you see in the movies, whatever, skydiving, sex, everything is sort of like, oh, it's not as big a deal as I thought it was going to be. Apart from ayahuasca, it was just like a whole nother level. It's like a whole new section of your brain opens up, and your
did you see that?
Just got some hearts. Yeah, I just got some hearts. Maybe that was ayahuasca communicating.
What did you just do?
Yeah, I think that's a gesture. Yeah, there we go, heart gesture.
Yo, what the hell? Why can't I do it?
That's not a heart shape. That's right.
Oh, it's because you've done ayahuasca and I haven't.
That must be it. That's my arcana. That's my arcana coming through. Yeah.
Okay, ayahuasca. You said exceeded your expectations, and talk us through this whole ayahuasca. How do we do it? Like, what went down first time? Yeah.
I'm a bit of a purist in that I don't think we should be experimenting on our own. I think it's like, experimenting with open heart surgery. You shouldn't experiment with open heart surgery. If that's not obvious, I don't know. Maybe there's no hope for you. But this stuff is so powerful. You should go and find really experienced centers to do that. I know that's expensive and it requires a big commitment, but the risks are really big. I do have friends who are no longer themselves. They do have psychotic issues. They have, it's triggered psychotic episodes, and people are never the same again for bad reasons. And we really need to be responsible. There are a lot of people who should never do psychedelics, people with things like severe personality disorders, schizophrenia, all sorts of issues like that related to personality things, for people who shouldn't do it. So I would say go to a really reputable center, somewhere like Rhythmia in Costa Rica, or Soltara in Costa Rica, the Temple of the Way of Light in Peru, and the Ayahuasca Foundation in Peru are all places that I know well, and they do really responsible work. And I feel like, with a lot of biohacking, if you're into biohacking, you're very into the fringe stuff. And so you want to be moving into these sort of unresearched, exciting new areas. But there's a lot of downsides. There's a lot of risks with psychedelics. You know, it's a very sharp blade. You know, with a sharp blade, you can do open heart surgery, but you can also, you know, pinch an artery and kill someone.
I like that.
So
I like that.
it's not something to be trifled with.
Absolutely. Right now we're hearing a bit too much about microdosing this and do boatloads of this, and it must be the more the merrier. So we should do LSD every day and run naked outside, and like that's biohacking, or that's the world. And you're right. These medicines are incredibly sharp, and they're dangerous when you push a little bit too far. So be mindful and have someone monitoring you, and a shaman who's been trained for a long time. That is the way.
Yeah.
If you were to do it.
And yeah, with support processes afterwards as well, with integration. And another thing, you know, we mentioned Chris Williamson. I love that he's always saying, does it grow corn? You know, does it do what it's going to say it's going to do? I know so many people who just do ayahuasca and drugs, you know, every week. And it's like, oh, I'm doing it for my mental health. It's like, yeah, but your life is exactly the same. You haven't changed. You're still unhappy. You're still unhappy with your relationship, with your job. You're still eating junk food. You're still not going to bed on time. You're still late for work. Like, actually, the purpose of this stuff is to improve your life. And a lot of people are, you know, using this veil of, oh, I'm using psychedelics for my mental health, man. And it's like, no, you're not. You're lying to yourself. You're getting high, which is fine. You know, getting high is fun, but don't tell me you're doing it for your mental health. Just get high and enjoy that. That's fine.
That's right. That is way too common. We talked about, man, pros, cons. There are some cool pros, though. Let's keep it real. Ronnie Landis's book, Addiction Free Lifestyle, somewhere right over there. You ever read Ronnie Landis? Oh my God,
no,
fucking incredible! I absolutely love that guy. It's uncovering the whole mindset around addiction. People are simply thinking it's some chemical dependency that we have. Rather, it could be some under the surface layer, some type of anxiety that we're holding on to, or some type of unconscious behavior. We don't want to step into the conscious. And he's saying these plant medicines, it could take that and go, oh, here it is. We got to go right into it, right? How did you feel with your first time when you said you kind of went off into the brain? Did you experience something like that?
So I'd say like the first 5 sessions I didn't get many fireworks. I got like a lot of physical stuff. I got like, maybe something's happening. And then by the end, I kind of found my dose. And yeah, that's when I started to have visions, meeting entities, having conversations with ancestors, you know, my father in spirit, my grandfather in spirit, and sort of getting to grips with some of their, you know, what they went through when they died, and helping them to help. What the way it was framed for me was like, sometimes when people die, especially in like you know, an unexpected way, like my granddad had a fall and then was like on the ground for many hours bleeding out, and he obviously didn't know really what was going on. And the way they framed it in this one place was like, yeah, he's kind of floating around. He didn't know what was going on, and you need to help him die. And so what I kind of had to do was die with him, like really let go. And I think at the same time, I was helping him to understand, okay, you're dying. You just have to surrender. You have to let go. You have to let go. You have to trust. You have to trust. And for me, I did that. And the lights just went off. Nothing. There was just nothing. It was just complete nothingness. I don't know for how long. I don't know if I was still breathing, but within a few moments I came back and I was like, oh, that's death. That's what death's going to be like. And I didn't have a huge fear of death before. I had, you know, normal fear of death, but a lot of people have, you know, outsized fears of death. But for me, I just feel like, okay, so long as I don't die in like a really horrific way, I reckon I'm pretty prepared for what death is going to be like. And that was the whole thing. Like George Harrison from the Beatles, he said after being in the Beatles, you know, after the extreme success, the whole second half of his life was just preparing for death, preparing his mind just to let go. And that I kind of feel like I did a little bit of that in a couple of ayahuasca sessions.
Whoa. I don't know if to cry or not. So when you see these, as you're with these entities of your ancestors, do you see them?
Did I see them?
Like,
Not really. It wasn't
how'd
like
you
a
know it's
vision.
him?
It was like a
How'd you
conversation.
know it's him?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and this is the thing, like, there'll be a lot of skeptics of being like, you're just having a dream. You're just having, you're just making this up. This didn't really happen. And I'm open to that possibility, but it feels real. It feels more real than reality. That's the only thing I can say is, like, when you are having those experiences, they feel more real than reality. And if you held a gun up to my head and said, okay, we're going to find out whether or not you're lying or not, I would 100% say, yeah, I was meeting entities. I've met my father in spirit, and if I have to die over that, that's fine. If you can prove me wrong, great. I'm open to that.
Wow.
I'm curious, but it's certainly.
And I can agree with you, man, because let me tell you, I've had some experiences, maybe not ayahuasca, but related to, to psilocybin, and that is quite the journey, right? Man, I was kind of lost my train of thought, but I'm saying you're right. You can really get outside of this connection to what's real, and that's amazing. Have you noticed any benefits related to anxiety and depression after you've taken it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So does it grow corn? So for me, corn was freedom from binge eating disorder, bulimia, anxiety, depression, insomnia. And yes, it grew corn. I no longer have anxiety, depression, or an eating disorder. I did many things, and who knows exactly what did it. I was in Overeaters Anonymous, I had therapy, did the Hoffman process, Path of Love, all these different things. And probably there was a cumulative effect. But I haven't binged in coming up to 5 years now, so I've sort of seen myself as free from that addiction. So yeah, it was all part of my healing process.
You used to binge
very
eat.
grateful for it.
You ate too much.
Yeah. Yes, ironic that a fitness model would. No, it's quite common because you starve yourself. You're in a calorie deficit
Right.
all the time, and the body goes, "No, don't like this. Let's overfeed."
Wow. Any other, have you experienced it with mushrooms or LSD? How were those?
Yeah. Fair bit of experience with mushrooms, LSD, ketamine. I'll talk about ketamine because it's legal in the US at least, and there is a company that I did a six week program with where they would send you a ketamine troche. They're called Mind Bloom, and I would really recommend that as an accessible way and not an extremely expensive way where you can do it at home. You can journey for about an hour. They have integration coaches, they have doctors, and I think that's a really cool program that's available right now.
Really incredible. The troches. I completely agree. What would you say for someone who wants to experience the world of psychedelics? Maybe they just want to start off with a microdose. How can we safely approach this?
Again, I'm a little bit of a Puritan in that I think you should go somewhere where it's legal. I don't think you should be breaking the law with these things. One, because I don't think we should be breaking the law. You can say the law is wrong, fine, but I don't think we should be breaking the law. And there are legal places. So certainly in the UK, there's the Psychedelic Society UK, where you can go on a weekend retreat to Holland, where psilocybin truffles are legal. You can go down to Costa Rica and Peru, where it's legal to do ayahuasca. You can go to retreat centers in the Caribbean and do it where it's legal there. And yeah, I don't encourage breaking the law, I'm afraid. Hopefully those laws will change, and hopefully we'll see clinics offering these things already.
Love that.
And then microdosing. So microdosing, does it grow corn? No, apparently not. Microdosing in the trials has been really disappointing. I think they've been no more effective than placebos for depression and anxiety in all the trials so far.
Interesting. Even if you notice an effect. How about for, let's say, you want to crank out some writing or some creative painting or of that nature? Would you recommend microdosing?
Uh, if it's legal, yeah. I've basically gotten in trouble for recommending illegal things in the
Okay,
past on a
so all
podcast,
right,
so I'm not
true,
going to
true, true.
recommend anything illegal
I know
again.
it's sticky waters, but let's say we're in
Yeah.
our respected resorts and we're under the surveillance surveillance of a trusted guide, or we're in a research study. Would you recommend? I shouldn't say recommend it. We've heard enough about the psychedelics. These things are powerful, and they are so dangerous that we need to, be careful about what we say. But you're right. Going into these respected retreat areas and doing some work, it can truly change. One last thing: default mode network. Do you know anything about that?
Mm. I do, yeah. So that is the part of the brain that's supposedly where the ego rests. And that is a sort of, our formulation of ourselves, it's who we think we are. And it's very hard to access with talk therapy, obviously. And one of the ways that psychedelics supposedly works is by accessing the default mode network and getting into reprogramming ourselves. And interestingly, a very recent study, 2023, cannot remember the name, sorry. They also did an MRI. I'm apologizing to them, not to you, Jake. If they listen, who knows? I'm sorry for forgetting your name, but thank you for doing this research. Put people doing conscious connected breathing in an MRI and found very similar changes in the brain to this, very similar changes to psychedelics. So when people are doing this conscious connected breathing, they're getting into this psychedelic states. And I like how Michael Pollan frames the default mode network and the act and how psychedelics work, and that it's like we have neural pathways in the brain, and it's a bit like moguls on a ski slope. The more people ski down a particular path, the bigger the mogul gets, the harder it is to go around that mogul. You have to keep going down that same path. And doing psychedelics and breathwork is like a fresh powder of snow, where you can start creating new dendrites and new pathways and things like that. And on dendrites, so dendrites are the sort of the growths that you get between neurons. One really important thing to say is if people are doing psilocybin and other psychedelics for their mental health, the eyes need to be closed. You cannot go and walk through nature. You cannot tidy your house and do mushrooms and expect the mental health benefits. The eyes need to be closed for the majority of the time. So blindfold, eye mask, that's what they use in all the trials.
Wow, I have never heard that. That's great to know. Is there some type of that dendrite formation that's occurring when the eyes are closed, not having so much information to be processed, and it allows for that growth?
Yeah. I think that's the general idea is like, when there's too much stimulus from coming from outside, the brain is just working on processing that stimulus. Whereas when it's just inside, the brain can work on the growth.
I love this because we're talking about all this, and some things are illegal, some things are not. But what we all have is the breath. And I think that's a great point to end on, because what we begin with, all of the aspects of breathing, from the anxiety reducing and possibly the trauma reducing, as well as the performance boosting, right? It's incredible. And hearing your whole story about this, the research you're doing, I'm going to try to sign up for your research study. I recommend highly for anyone who has the time to, because that really will change your life. I know breathwork has changed mine. I know it has changed yours, Richard, and you're doing great things for the world, man. So thank you so much for coming on. By the way, you were like 99% accurate with every single research study. So your memory is freaking on point. I don't know if it's all the breathing or biohacking, but thanks again, man.
Thanks very much, Jack. Yeah, absolute pleasure.
Dude, we're going to kill it. All right, guys, that was it. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening once again to the Cool Health Podcast. I hope you found some meaning out of this episode. Share this with your friends, like and subscribe for more. Thank you once again.